Hello everyone, I'm Jen and I make useful English Lit study videos on Shakespeare, poetry, fiction, literary ideas and more to help you become a literary expert. So if that sounds like what you need, make sure you hit the subscribe button below so you never miss out on my future weekly videos. So in today's video, I'm revealing a serious game changer for your poetry revision, which is the use of a reasoning-based AI model called DeepSeek to assist with your poetry analysis. Now, before I go on to explain what all of this means, here's a disclaimer. So I know that with the topic of AI and learning, it's a really rapidly developing field and every day things are different when it comes to AI. And I don't know what your school's policy is on AI. Quite a lot of teachers may not be super comfortable with the use of AI in learning, or at least not with the use of AI in all kinds of learning. And they might not be super comfortable with what I'm about to share. If you're not familiar with AI and the right and wrong ways of using AI tools, then what I'm about to share in this video might not feel 100% familiar either. But don't worry about it because I'm going to be walking you through this AI process step by step when it comes to applying it to your literary learning. The way I see it, AI tools, be it ChatGPT, Copilot, or any other large language models, AI tools are just that. They are tools, not substitutes for your own work, brain, or ability. So as long as you treat them as such, as a supplementary assistant, then AI really isn't all that different from people using the internet to do research 20 years ago, or using the calculator to do their arithmetic. Also, if you're watching this as a student, then I'm guessing that you'll be entering the workforce in anywhere between 5 to 10 years, yeah? Which means that by then, you'll be navigating an even more AI-ified world than the one we're in today. So really, you risk not equipping yourself with some major AI literary skills at your own peril. Bottom line is, technology is only ever as beneficial and harmful as we allow it to be. But the way I see it, we really need to be embracing and not shunning new technologies. And the right way to do it is with a future-ready open-mindedness while establishing clear ethical boundaries in the way we approach them. So in the rest of this video, that's exactly what I'm going to illustrate. So I've previously done a series of YouTube shorts sharing some ChatGPT hacks that you can use for literary learning. And since then, there's really been tons more new developments in the AI world, which I'm finding really hard to keep pace, even as a tech nerd. But one of the key recent innovations in large language model advancements has been the introduction of something called reasoning-based models, such as GPT-o1 and DeepSeek, which is different from earlier knowledge-based models like GPT-4o, Claude by the company Anthropic, or Gemini by Google. The point here is that this reasoning capability means that an AI will think through a question in a human-like manner before it generates a response, as opposed to generating a response based on pattern recognition and text prediction, right, which can risk a lot of illogicalities. So it's a massive step up, basically, when it comes to using AI for more complex analytical tasks. And a lot of people say that is especially great for math and STEM questions, but I've discovered that there's a unique feature to this reasoning type of AI which could really help you guys level up your poetry analysis skills as well, especially when it comes to tackling things like unseen poetry tasks. How does that work? Now, if you've watched my other videos on unseen poetry strategies over the years, you'll know that I really like to break poetry analysis down into a step-by-step process, where we'd begin by identifying patterns and contrasts, spotting techniques in whatever observations we make, and then linking the use of these techniques to the broader themes for meaning making. So what this step-by-step process implies is a structured thinking process, which lies behind it. And now, instead of you having to ask your teacher to recreate their thinking process every time you run into an unseen poem you find confusing, you can now ask a reasoning AI like DeepSeek to show you how it's done. Now, note that I stress to use a reasoning-based model instead of a knowledge-based one, because a knowledge-based one is just going to give you a step-by-step guide in its final polished form, but not its raw thinking process, which a reasoning-based model will do. But looking at the AI's behind-the-scene thought process is key for our purpose when it comes to understanding how we can navigate unseen poetry analysis tasks, because it's an examining how a brain, albeit a simulated one by the AI, links one observation to another and then comes up with tentative ideas and ultimately arrives at definitive conclusions that we can best understand the logical intricacies of how we ourselves can do something like analyze a complex poetic text, and then, of course, proceed to do it ourselves. So to illustrate how this works, I'm going to use the unseen poetry task from the 2023 AQA GCSE English Lit paper to section C, which I'm going to ask the reasoning-based AI model DeepSeek to help me out with. Now, you can access the DeepSeek AI platform with the link in the description box below to test this process out yourself, obviously, which of course I encourage you to do. And also, please note that LLMs will produce different answers every time, even to the same exact prompt given. But for the purposes of what we're doing here, I don't think the variation between my answer, which I'm about to show you in a second, versus the one that you come up with should affect the point I'm going to make in this video. I don't think the contrast or the difference is going to be too big. By the way, I'm using the DeepSeek model today because at the time of my making this video, January 2025, it's the only reasoning AI model out there that shows me its entire thought process. Plus, it's free and accessible to everyone with an internet connection, which means that you can easily access it without having to pay as long as you have Wi-Fi. GPT-o1 by OpenAI is also a reasoning-based LLM, but I don't really see it spelling out the thought process, and it's the thought process of the AI that I want us to focus on here today, not the AI's final response, okay? So let's dive straight into an example of how we're going to use DeepSeek to think about the way we approach poetry analysis. Okay, so you notice that I've started my prompt by giving the AI some context, right? So I say, hi, I'm a 15-year-old English Lit student and I'm now preparing for my GCSE exams. I struggle especially with unseen poetry analysis, mostly because I find the poems difficult to understand in the first place, and then the added time pressure of an exam environment makes it even harder for me to figure out how to start analysing the poem in the first place. Can you show me how I can do it with the sample task below? And then I give the AI that unseen poem from the exam paper. And then I also follow it up with, of course, the question, which is, in the poem Scaffolding, how does the poet present the speaker's feelings about their relationship? So notice that even with the way we prompt basically means the question that you input into the AI system, it's important that you give some context regarding who you are and a basic overview of the challenge that you're facing and specifically that you want the AI to help you solve. I am here focusing on the thought process. We're not going to actually even look at the final product because it's the raw thinking process that is the point here, right? So you notice that it says, okay, so I need to analyze this poem called Scaffolding for my GCSE Unseen Poetry question. The question is asking how the poet presents the speaker's feelings about their relationship. Let me start by reading the poem again and try to understand it step by step. First, the poem is divided into 5 stanzas. Okay, so right away, you see that the AI engages with structure, not your standard language, simile, metaphor, personification, whatever, right? So it's taking a zoomed out perspective, looking at the area that covers the poem entire structure, before diving into the more localized devices, which tends to be, your simile, metaphor, imagery. So it's a smart move because it takes into consideration the possibility that the poem's form might carry meaning as well. And it's good to always start with structure, remember, because often I find that when students start with language and they get comfortable with language, and especially if they're not sure about things like structure and form, they just tend to just stick with language and then forget about engaging with form and structure altogether, right? So it's good that this AI is starting with an observation about structure, stanza. The first 3 stanzas talk about masons building scaffolding. They test the scaffolding, make sure the plank stones slip, secure ladders, and tighten bolts. And then once the job is done, take down scaffolding, revealing the solid stone walls. And the next 2 stanzas address a dear person, saying that even if old bridges, maybe metaphorical bridges, right away, is trying to think in a more metaphorical way, break between them, they shouldn't fear because they can let the scaffolds fall, confident that the wall is built. So you notice that this AI is also starting with a kind of like summary memorizing mindset, right? It's just kind of trying to feel its ground, right? What is the poem actually saying? But also with an awareness of the poetic elements, right? So structure, stanzas, how it's formed, and then also metaphorical, right, associations. So the title is scaffolding. It goes on to engage with the title, making the first link between the structure and the title, right, which is a structure used to support a building during construction. The poem uses this as a metaphor for a relationship. Okay, so it's hazarding this relationship between the structure and the theme, right, metaphor, using that comparative link there. The scaffolding represents the temporary structures or efforts in building a relationship, while the wall is the strong, lasting part. The speaker is comparing the process of building a relationship to constructing a building, right? So comparing the literal incident that's being described in the poem to perhaps, the thematic idea, right? The masons take care to set up the scaffolding properly, just like in a relationship, immediately drawing that link. People might put in effort, communicate and work through issues, right? Which is kind of, the scaffolding in a relationship. And once the building, which, can understand as the vehicle for the relationship, is solid, the scaffolding isn't needed anymore. The speaker is saying that even if there are problems or breaks in communication, using a quote, old bridges breaking, they shouldn't worry because the underlying structure is strong. Now, the question is about the speaker's feelings. Now, this transition point right here is super important because what the AI is doing is reminding itself not to go off on a tangent and to stick to answering the question, right? Which is so key and something that I see a lot of students forget about, right? They tend to kind of, start analyzing a poem and then they forget that actually they also need to be engaging with the theme, the idea that the question is asking. More students should really learn from this AI and to bring themselves back on track if they notice that, okay, they're kind of like going off on this wild goose chase, right? With like spotting the devices and whatever, right? How does the speaker feel? Okay, the speaker seems confident and assured about the relationship. They acknowledge that there might be difficulties, but reassure their partner that these are just temporary, like scaffolding, and the real structure is solid. The use of never fear and confident shows a positive, secure feeling. The metaphor suggests that the relationship has a strong foundation built carefully over time, so temporary issues won't undermine it. So looking at structure and form, right? Again, right away, the AI is bringing itself back to looking at structure and form. The poem has 5 stanzas, each with 2 lines. Rhyme scheme is A, A, B, B, C, C, D, Z, E, E, which gives it a steady, predictable rhythm. This might mirror, the stability of the relationship once the scaffolding is removed. So the phrase "this might mirror" is important because it illustrates how the AI is tying its observation about a technical point, right, which is the form, the rhyme scheme, so the possible meaning and effect of this said form, right? And again, making a link between technique and theme. And this is important because, again, I see a lot of students often, they say, I identified, what the form is, what the rhyme scheme is, but then they don't link it back to what it actually might suggest about the topic, the theme that the poem is trying to convey, right? So the AI is showing us that right away is doing that, it's making that association. So the first section sets up the metaphor and the second section applies it to the relationship. The enjambment between the lines help the poem flow smoothly, perhaps reflecting the natural progression of building a relationship. So let's put aside the fact that, this observation isn't perhaps super in-depth, but what the AI is doing well is that it's tying the stanzas together and considering what logical connection there might be between these 2 stanzas. So engaging with the text cohesion and unity, right? Trying to kind of like make meaning out of the linkage structure, right, as a whole. How the first section connect with the second section. And then it moves on to language features, right? So you notice that, again, what the AI is doing is first it engages with the more high level, more difficult aspects like structure and form before it goes on to the ones that are more manageable, right? Language features that more students tend to be able to identify. So poet uses imperatives, strong, reassuring command, words like sure and solid stone, emphasize strength and permanence. So you notice that here, what the AI doesn't do well is that it has failed to identify what kind of alliteration there is here, right? It's not just words here, it's actually a kind of sibilant alliteration with sure and solid stone, right? And there's a nuance here because, despite the use of sibilant alliteration here, which is supposed to be a more quiet kind of sonic effect, is actually talking about a sort of strength in the foundation of the building or relationship, right? So there seems to be a kind of tension between the connotation of strength and sort of quietude in the sonic effect here, right? So something that's unpack, but the AI is not really engaging with it. The contrast between the temporary scaffolding and the permanent wall highlights the durability of relationships, yada, yada. Use of my dear as personal, affectionate touch, showing care and intimacy. So you notice that all the language feature observations here, they're not really impressive, but it doesn't matter because, again, what we're trying to do here in this video is to look at the overall logical flow of how an AI thinks its way through engaging a poetry analysis task, right? So any possible themes, yada, yada, yada. And then I should also consider any literary devices, which is a bit weird because it's kind of like you have done that throughout your thought process. But again, doesn't matter. Some good ideas here, maybe alliteration. Okay, it does engage with alliteration here, but otherwise everything else here is very trite, right? But what it is good at doing is it brings us back to the question. Now, how does the poet present the speaker's feelings? It's almost kind of like reminding itself, okay, don't stray away from the question. Okay, through the metaphor, structure, language choices, and then it kind of just like repeats its earlier points, blah, 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 whatever. But at the end, it's doing something that I think not enough students do, that they should really emulate this AI in doing, which is when it says, I need to make sure I link each observation back to the question, how the feelings are presented. So not just identifying techniques, but explaining how they convey the speaker's emotions. So the AI here, what it's doing is it's exhibiting a level of what we call metacognition, right? Metacognition, it's awareness of how it thinks, right? Meta, right? Kind of like a self-referential, I am aware of how I'm thinking, right? A self-awareness that actually I feel that a lot of students would do well to imitate, right? It's about being super self-aware and conscious of what you're doing with this task, which is, am I letting myself be carried away with analyzing the poem and forgetting that I'm supposed to be answering a question? And so developing the strong metacognition, which is what the AI has shown us, is super important because it always helps us to stay focused on the task at hand, right? Which is, of course, what we need to be doing at the end of the day. So what are some of the key takeaways from this exercise? First, and probably the most important one, is that we need to remember the AI's response is actually not the best response, right? You notice that its analysis is nothing impressive. So it should never be the response that you use in your own answer, let alone copy and pasting it and be like, okay, great, just the AI has done the work for me. I'm just going to copy and paste and this is the analysis and it's going to get me a top grade. No, it's not, right? So apart from the obvious ethical reason that doing so would be de facto plagiarism, you will notice that whatever the AI produces isn't especially groundbreaking or insightful. But of course, it's, a good enough answer is something that's passable and of course is well expressed. So if we're at that stage where we're not even sure how to put ideas together, then yeah, the AI here is doing a good job at modeling how we can put ideas together and express them in grammatical, eloquent sentences. Otherwise, a lot of its points are really quite vague. For instance, when it asserts that, okay, the speaker's saying that even if there are problems or breaks in communication, they shouldn't worry because the underlying structure is strong. But it doesn't really consider perhaps a more nuanced idea that human connection is only as sturdy as the effort that goes into it, right? And even with agreeable communication, which is perhaps reflected by the sonic euphony of the rhyme scheme throughout the poem, the rickety overall structure that's propped up by just 2 thin lines per stanza in the poem suggests that relationships, regardless of whatever communication that goes into maintaining them, are fundamentally rather fragile things and they require constant care, right? So you notice that this is a much more nuanced and detailed interpretation, but the AI doesn't come up with anything like this. The AI also doesn't specify the types of alliteration that it's identified. For example, that sibilant kind of alliteration in the phrase sure and solid stone that I mentioned. And most of the techniques that it picks out are pretty basic ones, right? Like metaphor, alliteration, and rhyme. And there's no discussion of higher level techniques like irony or syntax either. So you're not going to be relying on the AI for anything that's top grade analysis. However, remember that our point here today isn't to look for rigor or quality in the AI's analysis, but in examining the thought process that the AI exhibits as if it were a human being close reading the text. And in terms of the thought process, it's got a pretty clear and logical and sequential one that we would do well to learn from. It's super conscious of not straying from answering the question, and it's hyper aware of always linking whatever observations it makes back to the exam question, which is how the speaker's feelings are presented. Notice as well, right, that the AI is constantly reminding itself that the speaker's feelings is the main focus halfway through its analysis, and then once again towards the end of its thought process before wrapping up with 2 more notes to self that the task is to explain how the speaker's feelings are presented, and of course how the techniques help convey the speaker's feelings. Another really good takeaway from this DeepSeek thought process is its awareness of the relationship between the different elements in the text, i.e., how does one observation link to the use of a specific technique, and how does the use of one technique link to the possible meaning of a text, and how does the meaning and theme shed light on the speaker's feelings. So I stress this so much because a common fault that I see in students' poetry analysis is that points are often disjointed with very little causality between one point that's made and another. So maybe a student might have accurately identified a literary technique, but they haven't explained what that technique suggests about the text's meaning or conveys about the speaker's emotions or the setting's atmosphere, whatever. They haven't drawn the link, and the link is what backs us the points, right? Is the point. The link is the point. So it's a shame because a student might have picked up on an interesting phrase, but if they don't draw a deeper connection between that description and the broader themes in question, then they're not going to be gaining any marks. So, in a nutshell, while AI doesn't produce the most insightful or creative literary analysis, this DeepSeek reasoning model does at least 2 things very well that we could learn from. Number 1 is to always be super mindful of drawing links between every element in the text, from a word and a phrase to the structure and the technique to the theme. How do they work together synergistically to illustrate the bigger ideas and meaning that a poet is trying to convey? Number 2 is to constantly be reminding ourselves throughout the process of engaging with the poem to be answering the question that is asked and not go off on a tangent. A bigger point, and perhaps a much more important point, that we can glean from looking at an AI like this producing literary analysis and thinking through a task like this is that the future of studying English literature or any humanities subjects is this: simply writing a good enough answer is no longer good enough. Basically, any AI today can produce a grade 6 or 7 response, which means that there is now pressure for students to write something that is better than the grade 6 kind of response today, because the standard responses are all now available via AI. The grade 6 response today is very quickly going to be maybe a grade 3 response tomorrow. This is why I'm always emphasizing on this channel that we need to be reading literature in new, creative, unique, and personal ways. Because only by being original and authentic with our interpretation will we be able to distinguish ourselves from even the most impressive sounding AI bots. We're now at a stage in human history where we're not really competing against other students. We're competing against AI bots. That's what we're competing against. That's what you guys as students are competing against. That's what teachers are having to take into consideration as collaborative partners. If you consider the fact then that at the point of my making this video, January 2025, the age of mass AI adoption has only really just started, then you can imagine just how much more advanced AI is going to get very soon and how it's going to totally upend the way we learn in the future. There you go, guys. I'm not joking when I say that free open source reasoning AI models are a massive game changer for your literary studies or your academic studies in general, especially when it comes to something like understanding how you can go about unpacking or analyzing a complex text. And to think about a poem as if it were a problem to be solved and broken down step by step is going to be very helpful for you navigating this sort of task. Frankly, doing something like this using an AI to break down a poem is not the most elegant or sophisticated way of engaging with poetry analysis, I know, but for the purposes of what examples need today, having a tool like this is going to show you how it's done and is certainly more helpful than not having anything for your revision. Let me know if you'd like to see more AI strategies for English Lit learning content in the future, and maybe also what particular challenges you have faced in studying this subject, so I can think about how we can use AI in the right and responsible way to address them, but at the same time strengthening our creativity and unique insights. And by the way, if you're interested in learning more about how to use AI to level up your studies, then please sign up for early access to what might be an AI course and workshop that I'm going to be hosting and doing soon. I'll reach out with more details soon, but if this is something that you're interested in, please sign up and let me know about your interest so that you get early access to the course and workshop. I've also a full playlist of poetry analysis videos and a couple of AI tips for lit learning shorts, which you can watch here or in the description below, so you could go ahead and check them out. As always, please don't forget to hit the thumbs up button below if you found this video helpful for your studies in any way, so that you can encourage me to keep making these English Lit videos for you. And if you haven't already, please subscribe by hitting that subscribe button below so you never miss out on my future weekly videos. And I will see you very soon in the next one. Bye!